Have you ever been through a moment when everything seemed lost? When every effort felt pointless, and despair started creeping into your heart? Today, I'm going to share a story that might change the way you see life's challenges. Elias was a simple man, a farmer with calloused hands from years of hard work and a heart shaped by faith. From a young age, he had learned that the land could be generous, but also unforgiving. His piece of land, passed down through generations, was his greatest inheritance and his greatest responsibility. But now, everything was hanging by a thread. The drought had arrived without warning and without mercy. The crops were withering, the cattle were growing weak, and the bills were piling up like storm clouds about to break. But the rain never came. Month after month, Elias looked up at the sky, waiting for an answer, a sign, anything that could give him hope. Amidst all the losses and worries, there was one constant presence that brought him some comfort: his dog, Thunder. A strong dog with golden fur and watchful eyes, he never left the farmer's side. Thunder was more than just a pet, he was a loyal companion, a silent friend through the hardest days. Even in his darkest moments, Elias found himself talking to the dog, as if Thunder could understand his pain. And in a way, maybe he did. Because every time Elias hung his head in despair, Thunder would nuzzle against his leg, as if to say, "We're still here. We still have each other." But Elias had no idea that his faith was about to be tested in a way he never could have imagined. And just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, something happened that nearly made him give up for good. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next reflections. Now, back to the story. In that dry, sun-scorched land, where the crops withered a little more each day, Elias found comfort in Thunder's presence. The dog wasn't just a companion, he seemed to feel the weight of the farmer's worries. Every morning, Elias went out to check the fields, even though he knew nothing had changed. And every time he did, Thunder followed, wagging his tail as if to say, "There's still hope, my friend." Deep down, Elias knew his situation was becoming unbearable. The merchants in town had stopped giving him credit, and unpaid bills were piling up on the kitchen table. He avoided looking at them, but he knew it was only a matter of time before he lost everything. One night, as he sat on the porch staring up at the starry sky, he felt Thunder lie down at his feet. Elias sighed and ran his hand over the dog's warm fur. "Do you think God is still listening, buddy?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Thunder lifted his head and looked up at his owner with those loyal eyes. He didn't answer, of course, but Elias felt something stir inside him, a small warmth, as if, in that simple moment, he was reminded that he wasn't alone. The dog had always been there. Through the good days and the bad, through abundance and hardship. He didn't need promises or reassurances. He just stayed by his owner's side, trusting that somehow, things would be okay. And maybe that was exactly what Elias needed to learn. But, as life so often teaches us, some lessons only become clear after great trials. And Elias was about to find out that his hardest challenges were still ahead. The days dragged on as if time had frozen in the middle of that desert of fading hopes. Elias no longer knew what to do. The little water he had left was being rationed to the extreme, and the cattle, once strong and healthy, were now just a shadow of what they once were. That morning, he left early for town, hoping to renegotiate his debts with the store owner. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had to try. Before leaving, he looked at Thunder and gave him a gentle pat on the head. "Keep an eye on the house, boy. I won't be long." Thunder, as always, wagged his tail and watched him go. The walk to town was long and exhausting. The sun scorched his skin, and each step felt heavier than the last. When he arrived, he was met with cold stares. The shopkeepers had lost patience with his promises to pay. Elias left the store with slumped shoulders, having found no solution. He returned home more tired than ever. But as he approached, something felt off. The silence was deeper than usual. He called for thunder. Nothing. He called again, louder this time. No sound. No barking. Just the dry wind whispering through the twisted trees. His heart pounded. He ran to the backyard, checked behind the barn, looked near the well. Nothing. Thunder was gone. What could have happened? He never left Elias's side. Never. That unexpected absence felt like the final blow to his already weary soul. It was as if, after losing so much, God had now taken away his last friend too. Elias fell to his knees on the dry ground, his hands covered in dust. The weight of everything he had been holding in came crashing down at once. God, why? He murmured, tears streaming down his face. What else do you want to take from me? Silence was his only answer. But Elias didn't yet know that even in the darkest moments, God never leaves a broken heart unanswered. And that answer was closer than he could have imagined. Night fell over the farm, but Elias couldn't rest. Thunder's disappearance was the last drop in an ocean of sorrow. He felt alone, lost, and for the first time in his life, his faith wavered. Sitting on the porch, his eyes fixed on the darkness stretching across the fields, he felt his chest tighten. For years, he had faced hardships, always believing that God would sustain him. But now he wasn't so sure. Elias closed his eyes and let the tears fall. Lord, I don't know what to do anymore, he whispered, his voice trembling. I tried. I worked hard. I waited for the rain, but it never came. And now even thunder is gone. He took a deep breath and looked up at the starry sky. He remembered his father always telling him that God had a time for everything. But how could he understand that timing when everything seemed to be falling apart? If you're still with me, give me a sign. Anything. The wind blew gently, like a whisper, but it did nothing to ease the ache in his heart. With a heavy sigh, Elias went inside and collapsed onto his bed. Exhaustion weighed on him, but sleep refused to come. He tossed and turned until, in the middle of the night, a distant sound broke the silence. Barking. His heart raced. Thunder. He jumped out of bed, rushed to the door, and listened carefully. Yes, it was him. But the sound was far, too far. A mix of hope and fear surged through him as he grabbed a flashlight and hurried out, following the calls of his faithful friend. He didn't know it yet, but that night would change everything. The cold night wind cut against Elias's skin, but he didn't care. With a trembling flashlight in hand, he followed Thunder's desperate barking. His heart pounded, fear, hope, anxiety, all swirling inside him. Thunder! He called out, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. The barking grew louder. Elias quickened his pace, dodging rocks and dry branches, until his feet carried him to a place he rarely visited, a rocky area on the farthest edge of his land. There, in the shadows of the night, he saw his dog. Thunder was trapped inside a narrow cave, furiously digging at the ground with his paws as if trying to uncover something. His eyes lit up when he saw his owner, and he barked non-stop, as if to say, "Hurry, come quick." Elias knelt down and carefully pulled Thunder out. The dog wasn't hurt, but he was restless, pacing back and forth before returning to the cave entrance. "What is it, boy? What's in there?" Curious, Elias pointed the flashlight inside. At the very back of the cave, something glistened in the light. He frowned, confused. Stepping closer, he reached out and touched the ground. It was wet. Wet. Suddenly, the realization hit him. Water. Elias swallowed hard. He began digging with his bare hands, and the more he dug, the more the earth grew damp. Water trickled out, clear, cool. A hidden underground spring, right there, on his land, in the middle of the relentless drought. His eyes filled with tears. He had asked for a sign. And God had answered. Are you enjoying the story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone special. Elias fell to his knees before the water springing from the earth. His trembling hands touched the cool liquid, and a shiver ran through his body. For months, his land had cried out for rain, and now, right before his eyes, was the answer he had been desperately seeking. Thunder stood beside him, wagging his tail, as if he knew that something extraordinary had just happened. The farmer scooped up a handful of water and brought it to his lips. It was pure, sweet, like the land itself was offering him a new breath of hope. He stood up and looked toward the starry sky. Tears streamed down his face, but this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. "Thank you, my God," he whispered. Relief and gratitude filled his heart. The spring was small, but it could be expanded. If the water kept flowing, it could save his crops and his cattle. Elias ran back to the house and grabbed some tools. He spent the entire night digging, guided only by the lantern's glow and his newfound hope. With every stroke of his shovel, more water surged from the ground. It was as if life itself was returning to the dry, cracked soil. The morning sun rose with a different kind of light. Elias, covered in dust and sweat, gazed at his work with indescribable emotion. He knew this wasn't just luck or coincidence. It was a miracle. And it was all thanks to his faithful friend, who never gave up, just as God had never given up on him. The sun rose over the farm, and for the first time in a long while, Elias felt that this new day carried hope. The spring he had discovered in the night was a gift, a response from God when he needed it most. Without wasting any time, he got to work. With the help of a few tools, and Thunder, who followed him faithfully, he dug a small channel to direct the water toward his crops. The dry, lifeless soil eagerly absorbed the precious gift from nature. In the days that followed, Elias built a makeshift system to collect and store the water. Slowly but surely, his plants began to recover, and his animals finally had something to drink. Word spread quickly, and soon, neighbors arrived to see the miracle for themselves. "This is incredible, a real miracle," one of them said, watching the water flow through the land. Elias smiled. Yes, it was a miracle. But more than that, it was a lesson in faith. He realized that God had never abandoned him. Through every struggle, a plan had been unfolding. Looking at Thunder, who was happily running around him, Elias crouched down and gently stroked his head. "If it weren't for you, buddy." The dog simply wagged his tail, as if to say, "I knew everything would be okay." Elias closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. This was the beginning of a new chapter. The days passed, and Elias's farm began to transform. The water from the spring nourished his crops, his cattle regained their strength, and little by little, the land that once seemed doomed started to flourish again. But more than that, something inside Elias had changed too. He learned that faith doesn't mean a life without hardships, it means trusting that God always has a way, even when everything seems lost. For months, he had searched the skies for answers, waiting for a rain that never came. But the answer had been beneath his feet all along, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Thunder remained his loyal companion, but now Elias saw him differently. That dog, who never gave up, was a symbol of the perseverance Elias himself needed to have. One night, as he watched the moon reflect off the spring surface, Elias smiled and softly whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for never abandoning me." The lesson in this story is simple yet profound. Sometimes, God doesn't send the rain we're waiting for, but instead, He opens a well where we least expect it. And maybe that's what true faith really is, trusting, even when we don't understand. What about you? Have you ever been through a difficult moment, only to realize later that God was working the whole time? Share your story in the comments, it might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss one of our stories. May God bless you, and see you in the next video.